This program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Despite small and medium enterprises or SMEs accounting for over 90% of all businesses worldwide, an article by Stacey Michelle at the Institute for Self-Reliance states that their prevalence is on the decline. The article argues that the decline of small businesses and entrepreneurship is owed in significant part to the anti-competitive behavior by dominant corporations who routinely use their size and market power to undermine and exclude their smaller rivals. In efforts to stay in business, small businesses have now popularized mergers with these big brands or just simply being bought out to avoid further suffocation. While this means a large payout for the shareholders, the same is not the consequence for employees who sometimes find themselves without jobs. Similar to the effects of a merger, monopolies brought on by anti-competitive behaviors by larger companies often drive smaller companies out of business. So what usually happens is, because most monopolizing companies are extremely large, they can afford to lower their prices to a point where no small business can compete. All this undermines the efforts by small companies to stay in business, create employment, and remain key participants of the economy. So what necessary support can be afforded to SMEs to encourage their growth and avoid suffocation by large business chains that have already established themselves? Our guest this evening is Simon Hirschfeld, who's Director Consulting at Deloitte & Touche, to first of all speak on the specific challenges that present with having small and medium enterprises playing in the same market, competing for the same customer base with larger chains.
There's a number of challenges, right? And those challenges will continue. I think what's important for SMEs, together with the larger businesses, to focus on is around really how to create business linkages or economic linkages within their respective sectors and value chains. Large businesses present opportunities for procurement of services and goods from those SMMEs, right? Without those large companies, you don't have those larger budgets which they can access. If we look at the case in Botswana, there's a number of programs around local procurement as part of EDD. There's a number of CSI and CSR initiatives where businesses are being encouraged to support communities in the areas where they operate, right? So it's quite important that the narrative is changed to focus on ecosystem or business linkages in terms of how SMMEs can plug into those value chains. So then it raises the question, what is the responsibility of those large corporates or large businesses? Because rather than saying we are competing for the same customer base, you're simply saying how do we collaborate and work together to access that market and ensure those SMEs have access to those markets. Okay, then, so what needs to happen for these challenges to cease? Obviously, in Botswana, we have the Competition and Consumer Authority. We have the Competition Act, against which the authority enforces compliance or ensures compliance in terms of trade and competition issues in Botswana. One of those issues is that they actually ensure that large companies, when they source goods and services within Botswana, they ensure that they source them locally. In the event where they cannot source those goods or products or services locally, then obviously they can source them through other means. Botswana is a free market economy, right? So the principles of a free market economy and competition are such that whatever good or service you are producing, the demand for that will be based on your pricing, on your quality, on certain standards, and if your good can compete locally, domestically, or regionally, the demand for that will be there. I think what's important to remember in this regard, we are seeing a global agenda, and I believe it is also taking shape in Botswana, really around sustainability. And this is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals as a concept called ESG. ESG is environment, sustainability, and governance. And it really forces multinationals, large corporates, big businesses to think about sustainable ways of doing business in the communities in which they operate. So everything from local sourcing, from manufacturing, from partnerships with the community. And again, this for me brings into focus the need for ecosystem partnerships and business linkages. So I think as the public, as the consumers, we need to advocate for stronger sustainability, stronger governance in terms of this local sourcing and local procurement. And the SMEs themselves need to come together in terms of advocating for more rights and advocating for more local procurement and local sourcing.
Do these large corporates have any responsibility in protecting the smaller players, or is it just a survival of the fittest type of situation?
Yes, look, I believe they do. And this is exactly this concept I'm highlighting of environment, sustainability, and governance. It is quite prevalent within the mining industry or the extractive industry because, as you can imagine, mines are quite large in terms of their operations, and ensuring that the environment in which they operate can be rehabilitated, can be preserved, the communities that coexist with them can benefit in the long term, and that it is sustainable. So definitely these large businesses, large corporates have a responsibility to society and the community at large in terms of ensuring that SMMEs thrive and are sustainable. One other area, of course, that we haven't touched on specifically is in terms of corporate social investment or corporate social responsibility. The focus, as I'm seeing the trend, is a lot of people, a lot of communities and entities are paying more attention to the spend or the percentage allocation of corporate revenues towards the CSR and CSI initiatives. For example, what is Deloitte doing in terms of giving back to the community as a Botswana-based company in education, in terms of women in business, in terms of youth entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth. So we have a large program called World Class that focuses on that.
Could there be any advantages to the coexistence of smaller companies and these larger business chains that benefit the consumer and then ultimately, the benefit of the economy?
So as large corporates grow, effectively what happens is their cost structures also grow. And so they want to balance their cost structure against their revenue structures. One of the benefits or one of the ways that they can do that is either by outsourcing key components of their value chain and specifically from a sourcing point of view to SMMEs. That benefit in the long run can be passed on to the consumer in terms of a cost saving. So you would effectively be seeing a reduction in prices that consumers are paying for goods and services by having local service providers providing a component of that business. And the benefit to the enterprise and the economy at large would be a reduction in their cost structures. If the cost structures reduce and their revenues increase, they can pay employees more. There's more taxes that they can contribute to the economy, and ultimately more funds or budget available that can be used for social responsibility initiatives, the CSR and the CSI initiatives that I spoke of earlier. The important thing about this is there needs to be collaboration. It needs to be structured, it needs to be agreed as a deliberate partnership between large enterprises and small business. I haven't touched on the role of government. Government's responsibility in this whole ecosystem, it's not really to drive this because the private sector has got a key responsibility, but government's role is to ensure there's an enabling business environment. If the business environment is not there, in terms of it being conducive with enabling policies, easy processes for businesses to register, to transact, and the enabling infrastructure in the environment, then it's going to become more difficult to unlock this value.
We've been talking about governments responsibility in enabling the SMEs growth. We've been talking about how the larger corporates could, protect the smaller man. But what is the responsibility of the SME sector in ensuring their own growth,
I know a lot of people always say government should do this, government should do this. It's not government's responsibility. The government cannot solve all the problems of the nation, especially from an entrepreneurship development point of view, right? So there's a couple of issues here. And unfortunately in Botswana, we have this challenge of operating in silos, even within the private sector, okay? So SMMEs need to sort of come together in terms of advocacy, okay? And as part of that advocacy, they are really trying to solution and solve for problems in society, right? So as an entrepreneur, when you get up every day, you are trying to solve a problem that exists in society. You don't need government for that, right? If you are really solving a societal problem, the demand is there already. You have the market, right? So the first thing is they really need to think quite innovatively, okay? So this innovative mindset around how do we solve the problems of today for the population of tomorrow, right? Africa has got the largest population of the youth in the world, right? So looking at that, and most of these youth are digital natives, right? So again, from an innovative point of view, how are these SMMEs going to leverage technology, digital technologies, to be able to access these markets and solve some of these problems that we see across our continent in Africa? So they really do have this responsibility of stepping back, seeing what are the problems and challenges that we have as a nation, in our society, on the continent, and how they are going to solve for them. And they need to collaborate. This thing of saying I want to be a tenderpreneur, an entrepreneur, and I'm going to get that deal, and once I've got it, I'm good. It's very short term. We need to move from short-term mentality to very long-term, impactful thinking, right? And that takes resilience. It takes perseverance, okay? And when you do that, you will automatically start building this ecosystem of players that you can collaborate with. You will never be successful as an individual, right? That's the African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others.